All right, welcome back to The Boy of the Painted Cave by Justin Denzel. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 2. So after you're done listening to this video, please make sure you go answer the Chapter 2 questions, which can be found in your Otis Assessments tab. All right, so in Chapter 1, we learned that our main character is a boy named Tao. Tao does have a bad foot, which kind of makes him a little bit of an outcast within his tribe. We know that there's a woman named Kala who is taking care of Tao throughout his life since he does not know his mother or his father. And Tao kind of is a daydreamer. He doesn't really like hunting, and so that also kind of separates him from the rest of his tribe. When he goes back after the hunt and actually forgets the rabbit, the leader, who is named Volt, gets really upset with Tao and banishes him from the tribe until he could come back with a rabbit. So that is where we left off here. So we'll pick back up on Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Tao propped his torch against a stone, then gathered armfuls of brushwood and kindling and piled them up near the sandy embankment. He set them afire and threw on more sticks and logs until the yellow tongues of flame licked high into the darkness. Except for a few grubs and a handful of dried berries, he had not eaten since early morning, and he felt a dull emptiness in his stomach. Holding his torch high, he searched about under a group of oak trees, looking for acorns. But it was late in the season, and the ground had already been picked over by marmots and pigs. Just then the gliding shadow of a flying squirrel swooped down from an old dead willow at the top of the embankment. Tao looked up and saw a hole in the scarred white trunk, and he knew where he might find a meal. Broken limbs jutted out from the old tree, and it was an easy climb. Tao reached into the hole, his fingers groping through the warm nest of leaves and fluff. He brought out handfuls of acorns. Back on the ground, he sat on his heels and cracked them open with a handy stone, and picked out the bits of meat with his fingertips. The acorns were dry and tasteless, but they helped to take the edge off his hunger. Next, he gathered bunches of dried meadow grass and spread them out on the sand to make a bed. With the embankment at his back and the warm fire in front, he felt safe from the hyenas and prowling leopards. The night air was cool and still. He lay back on his bed of straw, feeling the prickling stems against his back and smelling the sweet odor of the new grass. Except for the short coughing roar of a cave lion far out in the valley and the hiss and sputter of the fire, the night was quiet. For a long while he lay awake thinking about his quarrel with Volt and the others over the missing rabbit. The punishment did not bother him, for he had been out alone in the bush many times before, and he was not afraid. At times like this, he often thought of his mother, whom he had never seen, and he wondered what she was like. He closed his eyes and saw a picture of a young girl, the hair the color of honey and a round, smiling face. He reached out as if to touch her, then withdrew his hand. It was only a vision. He wished he could draw her as he imagined her to be, but this would be taboo. Most of all, it was against the law of the clan to make an image of a person. It would offend the evil spirits. Tao shook his head as he huddled down in the loose straw. Why are all these things bad? He wondered. Why is it wrong to draw in the sand, to make a picture on a stone, to be born with a lame foot? Is there nothing good, nothing right? Is this why Volt is always angry? Everything he sees is bad. Kala said she had never seen an evil spirit. If they are real, where do they stay? Where do they hide? In the forests, behind the mountains and boulders? Just then Tao heard a movement in the tall grass. He jumped up quickly and pulled a flaming torch from the fire. As he looked into the darkness, he saw only the moving shadows of the stunted willows. Then, just outside of the glare of his torch, he made out a pair of gleaming eyes. Tao froze and gripped his spear tighter. It could be a prowling cave lion or a leopard. If it was bold enough to come within the light of the fire, he would have little chance. He watched cautiously, waiting for the beast to show itself. Slowly he lifted his spear, ready to throw as the yellow eyes came closer. Then he stopped. Fear left him as he made out the thin gray shape of the little wolf. The animal cringed and crept up through the grass. Little by little it came into the light of the fire, whining softly. Tao leaned down, clicking his tongue. The animal seemed to be begging for help. He had heard about wolf dogs before, that sometimes during bad seasons when they are hungry and half starved, they hang about the camps looking for a bone or a scrap of meat, or to lick at the hearth rocks where the fat drips. This one was young and thin as a shadow. If it didn't find something to eat soon, it would die. Tao squatted down, talking to the animal softly. You come back when I have nothing to give you. No food, no meat. The wolf remained silent, watching Tao intently. You must learn to hunt on your own, said Tao, creeping closer but still not touching the animal. There is food in the fields and in the woods, voles and mice under the grass, ground squirrels in the meadow. You must sniff them out and catch them. The sound of Tao's voice seemed to quiet the animal. It whimpered softly and began to creep up on its belly until its coal-black nose was only an arm length away. Tao reached out to touch the soft muzzle, but the animal pulled back and bared its fangs. The boy tried again. Once again the young wolf shielded away and would not allow itself to be touched. Tao sat still, watching as the animal edged closer. The wolf dog's ears were laid back. Its ribs showed through the ragged gray fur. Tao saw the hunger in its yellow eyes. He saw in it the lean face and the pale tongue that darted out to lick the thin lips. Then, in the flickering light of the fire, Tao saw something else, something glistening white sticking out of the wolf's mouth. It was not a fang, not a flash of white tooth, but a long sliver of bone jammed deeply into its upper jaw. Now Tao understood why the animal refused to eat, why it was so thin and weak. Somehow, in fighting for its food, in pulling or tugging on a piece of meat, a splinter of bone had become lodged in its jaw. Now it could not feed. It could not even hunt. Tao crept closer, inching nearer and nearer, reaching out slowly, his hand almost touching the wolf's muzzle. The little animal did not move. Its yellow eyes caught the firelight, and again its lips pulled back in a low snarl. Tao waited, his heart beating fast. Then, with a sudden lunge, he sprang forward and grasped the wolf's head, and with one hand and the splinter of bone between the fingers of his other hand. The little animal jumped back, yelping and crying, but Tao hung on. Boy and wolf twisted and turned, tumbling across the sandbank. The wolf shook his head violently, opening and closing his jaw, trying to escape. Still Tao held on tight, floundering across the sand as the wolf continued to yelp and thrash about. Suddenly, the sliver of bone came loose in Tao's fingers. The wolf was free. He ran about in circles, whining, rubbing his bloody muzzle in the damp earth. Be quiet, said the boy. He held up the long splinter of bone, blood-smeared, glistening red in the firelight. Your demon of pain is gone. Now you can eat again. The wolf dog picked himself up, weaving back and forth on unsteady legs. For a long moment he stared at Tao, his yellow slitted eyes shining, his pink tongue licking at the bleeding wound. Go, said Tao. Go back to your pack and hunt with your friends. You will soon grow strong again. The little wolf hesitated. Tao saw it look back once or twice. There was a soft rustling of grass as the animal disappeared into the night. Tao smiled, but after the wolf dog was gone, he felt a sense of emptiness. He was alone again. He got up and threw more dried willow branches and a log of birch wood on the fire, enough to last through most of the night. Then he lay down again. He heard the whooping laugh of the hyenas far out on the grassland, and he knew they were hungry too. His hand reached out and his fingers closed around the spear lying beside him. He was tired, and there was a weariness in his bones, and he fell asleep quickly. As he slept, Tao drifted off into a narrow tunnel that led into a large cave. On the floor were shells and hollow stones filled with black, yellow, and red paints. The walls were smooth and unmarked, waiting for the hand of a painter. Tao picked up the red shell and dipped his finger into the oily color. With wild sweeps of his hand, he began to paint. His arm moved beyond his control, as if it had a mind of its own. Slowly, a bounding red deer took shape, its antlers thrown back, its nostrils flaring as it ran. It leaped over the ground, fear and panic showing in its eyes. Tao put down the red shell and picked up the black one. Once more he dipped his fingers in the paint and began to draw. This time a huge black wolf came forward, racing after the deer. With bounding leaps it gave chase. Great ruffles of fur stood out around its neck and shoulders, and a long waving tail flew out behind it. Tao finally picked up the shell containing the yellow paint. He dabbed it on the wall, and suddenly the wolf stared out at him with golden eyes. Tao went on drawing and painting, covering the walls with herds of bison and mammoths, horses, and aurochs. When he awoke, the sun was coming up over the horizon. The fire was a gray heap of smoldering embers, and the shrill kee-kee-kee of the crustal came from the branches of the dead willow tree. He rubbed his eyes and glanced around, and he knew he had been dreaming. He stood up and looked out across the grasslands. The valley was bathed in a golden glow of color. The mountains in the distance were morning green. Here and there, small patches of snow marked the last footprints of fading winter. Behind him was a long ridge of limestone cliffs, and on top of that were the flatlands, the high plains. He felt the pangs of early morning hunger, and he started out across the valley through the knee-high grass. He stopped frequently to turn over the stones and pull up sod in search of ants and grubs. He was used to going long hours without eating, but now he had gone almost 2 days without food, and he was growing weak. He found a few white grubs and plopped them into his mouth, swallowing them whole. He knew they would taste better roasted, but he could not wait. Even this was not enough. He would have to find something more. And he knew that if he wanted to go back to camp, he would have to catch another rabbit. Once, through the grassland, he made his way across the edge of the swamp until he came to a thicket of alders and briar bushes. It was dense and tangled with creepers and thorns. He had never been past this place, but beyond, he knew, lay a dark marshland of winding creeks and green forests. The clan people called it the Slough. The elders said it was peopled by demons. The hunters never went there, and the woman would not dig its roots or harvest its berries, lest they become cursed by the evil spirits. Tao stood on the edge of this forsaken place, and the thought of the game and food that might lay within. For a moment, the threat of taboo held him back. He limped slowly along the edge, undecided, trying to see beyond the tangles of vines and branches. Then, through the thicket, he heard the grunt of a sow and the answering squeal of piglets. He forgot about demons and evil spirits and pushed his way through the thick briars. Heedless of the thorns that scratched his arms and caught at his deerskin leggings, he plunged deeper. Soon the earth became soft and black, and he smelled the musty dampness of the sluggish creeks and heard the rattling call of the kingfishers. The dank woodland was dark and green, with shafts of sunlight flickering through the bare branches of the old hornbeams and willows. Tao stopped and glanced around, wondering if the hand of an evil spirit would strike him. But nothing happened. This place looked no more evil or dangerous than many places he had seen before. Gripping his spear tighter, he went deeper. He came to a shallow stream covered with rafts of new watercress. He scooped some up in his fingers and smelled its freshness. He chewed some and found it crisp and sweet. Oyster mushrooms grew in thick clusters on the trunks of dead birch trees, and berry bushes formed dense thickets between the scrub. The mushrooms were shriveled now, and the berries were sparse and dry, but he marked the spot in his mind. By late spring, the mushrooms would be lush, and the berries would be ripe for picking. In another stream, he found a bed of freshwater mussels. He lay on his stomach and reached into the icy water and picked some of them out of the mud. With his flint knife, he pried them open and ate the soft pink flesh. He was still hungry, but he felt better now, and a new lightness welled up within him. Here was food in abundance. He leaned down and tried to catch a lazy suckerfish that was swimming along the muddy bottom of the stream, almost within its grasp. Suddenly, a hideous shriek echoed through the marshland. Wow! 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 It went, sending an icy chill racing up Tao's spine. It came from the far side of the creek. Tao jumped up quickly and stood in frozen silence. He looked across the stream to the clump of dark cedars from where the awful scream had come. If he had never seen an evil spirit before, he thought he was about to see one now. Alrighty, that is the end of chapter 2. So now you're going to be answering the chapter 2 questions. So you're going to go to Otis. You're going to click on your Otis Assessments tab. You're going to click on Questions from Boy of the Painted Cave, chapters 1 through 4. And you're going to be answering these 3 questions from chapter 2. So why wasn't the wolf eating? Please explain. What was the resolution of the wolf's problem? So how did Tao solve that problem? And then finally, Tao entered the slough. Why was this a good idea? Why might this have been a bad idea? So please make sure you answer both of those as well. All right, thank you.